What's up, everybody? It is Lauren deLisa Coleman back with you again for another episode of the Inside series here at Filmio. And we have so many interviews to bring to you during the San Francisco Film Festival that is coming up. We're kind of doing some before and some during because there's just so much to cover. This next interview I am very excited to bring to you because these are two very accomplished filmmakers, and this film is really, really hot. It's called, let me just give you the specific title, American Justice on Trial. And I have with me both producer and co-director Andrew Abrahams and Herb Ferrette, his co-director. And guys, thank you so much for joining us. I know, as you guys can see, Herb is kind of on the move. He's already off to another shoot as soon as he finishes this interview. But we're lucky and glad to steal just a few moments of his time now with Andrew. So both of you, again, thank you so much. Who wants the honor of kind of giving us a synopsis of the film, and then we can jump into it?
Well, I think Andy's more well-versed because he was warming the editing chair seat a lot more than I was, so he's got it down.
Okay. You know? All right, Andrew, it sounds like the spotlight is on you.
Yeah. Well, it tells the forgotten story or the untold story of the Huey Newton trial in 1968, Huey Newton from the Black Panthers. And the aspect of it that's untold is how important that case really was in terms of many aspects of criminal justice. And so we're telling that story, which hasn't been told. We've heard about the Black Panthers. We've heard about Huey Newton even. So this is really about the case itself and why it was so extraordinary and why it's sometimes referred to as one of the trials of the century.
So I felt the same way looking at this, and you guys, even just to see the trailer is it's just exciting, right? And very thrilling. And I thought, wow, how come we just don't really know anything about this when you hear, about how many people were surrounding the courtroom from outside every day, and just how it became almost a movement, right? How did you both come to this story and decide, to kind of tell it now?
Well, okay, the creator of the project, her name is Lisa Perlman, and she's written 2 books about this trial. She's one of the foremost experts on the case. She's the one who wanted to make a film. Eventually, I was brought in as to do cinematography and then to do some editing, and then I ended up being the director. This film has been going on for many, many years. So that's how I got involved. And then we pulled Herb in, and I think it's sort of an interesting, the meat of this case, the meat of the trial is that the importance of a diverse jury. Up until that time, it was usually just white men, 12 white men on juries. And there was even a law that would allow the prosecution to excuse any black juror. Now, that's partly changed because of this trial.
And this is just so fascinating, isn't it? Because what year are we talking about specifically?
Yeah, we're talking about 1968.
Yeah, so by 68, it's still, white male juries in the United States for the most part.
And so what I want to get at here, Lauren, I think that this is really important, is that I think that Lisa, who is the writer and creator of the project, is white. She's a former judge. I'm a white person. And so we're making a film that has to do with a black subject. And so the idea of bringing in diversity into the filmmaking process became more important than we had realized. That was the basis of the trial itself and of the jury selection. So we're bringing that also into the filmmaking. So that's why we brought Herb in.
So now, Herb, you had not worked with this team prior.
Yes. I have worked with Abby Ginsburg before. She and I have done a couple of docs and things like that together, correct. But Andrew, this is our main voyage.
Abby Ginsburg is one of the co-producers on the project.
Right.
Correct.
So then at what point did you come into the filmmaking process, Herb? a third of the way in, or still kind of in pre-production, or what?
Well, the shooting was done. We had now acquired 80 or 90% of all the material, content that we needed. As far as being able to develop a content string, being able to do a string out and to have an idea about what we had as far as the strengths of the project was concerned. But what was left to do was graphics, a little more archival acquisition and things like that, so I came in at about, let's say 30% of the film was left to do, which is really honestly a good place to start from, because then it's right into the post-production. It's right into the process of being able to make decisions that obviously affect the show that you will see at home.
How fascinating. And I mean, even though you hadn't all worked together before, and you guys, I just wrote down this because it's so impressive. I mean, it really, you are, just so well versed in what you do. I mean, Andrew, you are Oscar nominated, Emmy nominated. You've had previous, Best Documentary at Tribeca Film Festival. Herb as well. I mean, your work with PBS in terms of Best Feature Documentary and so much more. You too are Emmy nominated, correct? So it must have been very interesting to be able to bring such a wealth of expertise together, but that had not really been, shall we say, synergistic before. Like how was that? Because everybody has his or her own style and way of working together. How did you kind of create a team that ended up making such a wonderful film?
Yeah, well, one of the things that one of our characters says in the film is, she's a jury expert, and she's talking about the importance of diversity on the jury. And she says, if you just have one group of people, one community of people, you have one set of one perspective. And so that's why it's important to have diversity in the filmmaking process as well, especially for a film like this. So that's why it's important. Her brings an experience, a story, and an experience that I don't have, and certainly that I bring something that he doesn't have. So I think the synergistic effect, like you said, was very helpful.
And also quite honestly, because we are old, at least I think I am. Right, exactly, Andy. I know. Learning how to cooperate and to be on point and to support the other vision and carry it along, as opposed to trying to impose yourself on something. And especially because of when I came into the project. Now, it would have been a slightly different dynamic if I had started a year ago, however, now and coming into this part, I've got enough experience to know we want to get it done, and so the best thing to do is to try it, change it if necessary, and then move on.
So it sounds like, obviously, Herb, you hit the ground running. Let's talk a little bit about the making of the film itself. There's obviously a good amount of archival footage and so much more. Was it challenging at all to be able to, acquire that? Because we're looking at more than 30, almost 30 years. More than 20 years at least, right? Since this actual trial, right? And you're not just obviously, or did not acquire the typical footage that we are used to seeing when we see something regarding the Black Panthers and Huey Newton. So how did you kind of go about it? How long did it take? And then I also loved the use of, I don't even want to really say their illustrations. It seemed like they weren't pastels that were used, right? What were they? So talk to me a little bit about that and how you kind of decided when to be able to incorporate that versus, actual archival footage versus, real, present day interviews.
Okay, I'll speak from the producing side of it. I've never done a film with such heavy reliance on archival footage, and certainly we needed that. We needed it to bring the past to the present. But we also don't want to just do the same old thing, use the same old footage. So it was a challenge to come up with other creative ways to tell the story. Obviously, one of them is courtroom sketches. Now, at the time, courtroom sketches were done. They're still being done for federal cases, but there was hardly any courtroom sketches of this trial for some reason. So we actually hired a courtroom sketch artist to create specific images just for us.
Oh,
so that's how that happened.
That's how it came about. But they're in color, though. They're in color, you guys, just so you know, as opposed to the typical, which is, what is it, just gray or with a pencil?
No. The color was
today in color?
Today and yesterday. Yeah, the color has always been in effect. Yeah.
Okay, how interesting.
And we also made that choice to have this type of artistic representation because as you are learning, the minimalist style is very, it's all up to art. Art is art. And we do honestly look at these as an art because each piece is a unique piece of art.
Very true.
And that is quite a few ones that, for instance, that are doing the Mulberry case or several other cases, they save these and they own them. It is not honest. It is not the ownership of the production when you walk away from it. And also as far as like when we started to use them, it was after the entire show was cut because then we knew exactly more what we wanted to be able to represent, because we knew that in order to show the emotions of Huey, to show the emotions of Charles Gary, the lawyer, or to show, quite honestly, to be able to show the diversity of the jury, we had to present it. And that's how we could do it, is through this way.
So what were some of the most challenging kind of parts of bringing this to life that you had to overcome, that maybe you didn't foresee, that you had to kind of figure out really some major solutions around in order to be able to move to another step? Everything?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Everything in the filmmaking process is a challenge. I think one of the biggest challenges here was coverage, how to tell the story in a visual way. We had a lot of interviews, tons of interviews, but a film is more than just a compilation of interviews. So that was the biggest challenge, was finding a way, creative way, engaging way to tell the story visually.
And also, going back to the point of the archival, in the films I've done, for instance, Fight in the Fields, I had over 100 hours of archival footage, but that was a wealth of information. And in this particular one, because we also did not want to, for instance, show things that had been shown before. We really wanted to try to make it so that what you did see in archival was unique to this process. So that then when people did explore and find out more about Black Panthers, as they put all the shows together, that they would learn something each time they saw something from a different project. I mean, that was a unspoken goal that we did obviously accomplish and wanted to be able to do.
And it was also spoken as well.
Yeah,
to be fair.
We'll talk about that later, but yeah.
That's funny. So then now, this is going to be obviously shown at San Francisco Film Festival. Had you kind of envisioned that before while you were working toward the film? I mean, since where you're based, where the film takes place, and so much more, was this just like top of the list? It fell into place nicely because the film wasn't completed until 2 days ago. No. So, wow.
So they were good enough to be able to look at the film as essentially a rough cut or fine cut, and be able to make an evaluation on that basis. And the film has come a long ways since then. Like it's not until the end that a lot of the finishing touches came about and really brought it to a whole different level. So I think we were lucky that we were able to get into the festival. And it's a perfect place to have our world premiere in the San Francisco International Film Festival because of its location, because this is where the story unfolded.
Right. So what do you hope audiences... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Herb.
And I think that is, Andrew hit it at the end, is that it's a local story that has national and international ramifications, and so I would say that San Francisco, I'm going to go on the limb here and say they would have been embarrassed if a local story was premiering at, say, Tribeca. So I don't think it, especially one that was born here. I mean, So that, but also as we are making this, as we are doing any project, you do have what you would say is your target market or your target audience. And we know that Lisa wants this to be able to be something that's featured in law schools, et cetera. But, the creative crew definitely wanted to be able to know that we wanted to figure out how a broader slice of life could also, meaning audience, could also experience what this film brought to the table. And festivals are always the entree into that.
Absolutely. So what do you hope that audiences take away most from the film when they watch it, whether it's here at the festival or, wherever the film actually ends up being sold and what have you? What do you think some of the main scenarios are? Because, like you said earlier, it's not just the Huey P. Newton story, but overall, right?
I want to hear what Herb has to say as well, because it might be different. But what I will say is that I think it's important for people to see that these issues that are in discussion today have been going on for a long time, and that there have been also strides, and that this court case was a turning point in terms of jury selection, and a book was written, a handbook was written after this, and it sort of became a Bible for criminal defense lawyers. It's called Minimizing Racism in Jury Trials. So that's what is important to me, that we actually do have some solutions. We have things that work to minimize bias, to minimize racism, and to create more fairness in the criminal justice system. So that's what I would like to put out there. We have a long ways to go. There's certainly a lot more to get right and to create more fairness. But this is one area and one place and one time where it worked.
And
dovetailing with that and thinking about what I want audiences to do is to try to find out more. And obviously to figure out what it's like as a person of color to become more civically engaged, in a way that's not just on the street. But how do you, they always talk about divesting from Exxon if you're a stock. Well, if you aren't in Exxon, you don't have a vote. Our vote is that we're citizens of the United States. Therefore, being able to take creative action, to be able to be part of the government system and fight it from within, not necessarily always from without. And it did, as Andrew talked about, being able to have the jury selection become more equitable, which still isn't there. In other words, I as a freelancer can't afford to go to jury duty because if I don't work, I don't get paid. And that's a big deal when you start talking about diverse juries or juries of your peers, because then as a jury of your peer, if I'm poor or underrepresented, I can't afford as a single mom to go to jury duty. I can't afford to do that if I'm a freelancer like I am right now. And so how can I get on a big case? Well, Huey was only X amount of days, but can you imagine some that take months?
Right.
So there's a lot more reform that clearly is in place, but the economic part and the fighting from within part is for me crucial.
I think that those are like really, really amazing points. Before I guess we wrap, is there anything else that either of you would like to add?
Yeah, I think one thing that we didn't talk about, and I'll just say it briefly, is that one thing that was very significant about this case, besides the diverse jury, there were more women on it than men. I think there were only one or two white men on it. Is the jury foreman. It was the first time there was a black jury foreman in a major murder case. Yes.
Oh,
so that was very, very significant. And it brought a perspective to the jury that it would not have had otherwise.
Just amazing. From the filmmaking side, though, either tips or suggestions that you might have for other documentarians out here who may be watching or thinking, wow, I mean, I have, as you maybe said earlier, Herb, 100 hours worth of archival footage. Where do I get started? Or how do I actually go about making this something that's more interesting rather than, just a kind of collection of interviews, right? Because I know that you said that was something you thought about from the beginning. Did you lay that all out, storyboard-wise? Any kind of maybe tips around that, or what you think might be coming up trend-wise, even in documentaries? I think we've seen so many now, whether, it's like the inventing Anna craze that is, it just
Right.
made so many different, documentaries, real life coming down the pike after the Shonda Rhimes, kind of interpretation, if you will. Documentaries seem to just be exploding, right? So how are some of the things that you see, I guess, kind of either coming up in that space or, again, tips that you might have?
I'll just say briefly, because I know that we have to get going, is that when you have so many cooks, and we have two directors, we have the producer, Lisa Pearlman, we have a co-producer who is very active. It's very challenging to create a film with so many cooks. And it's also, it sort of mirrors the jury process with all these different people from different perspectives. How do you bring something to fruition? And so it's challenging, and I think, but it can also happen. So I think that's one thing that's sort of different about this project from other projects of mine. And I think in the end, we made it work.
Herb?
And for me, it's tongue in cheek, get a credit card with as much of a spending limit as you can, so that you can finance this film, because budget is huge. Being able to afford to do a project is serious, which is why this one necessarily 3 years, which isn't necessarily unusual. When we think about how up-and-coming generations are used to the app, and right now, there are still things that take time, and that time, I think, is a lesson, and I think that time allows you to. Documentaries are documenting an event, and events are, and in our case, we're documenting an event or retelling an event that happened in the past. But if it's a current thing, it evolves every day. And so, how do you now make decisions that enable you to be that fly on the wall, to allow the material to happen in front of you as opposed to you trying to manipulate it from behind? That is also a way of documenting. However, me being a purist and old school, I roll tape, and what happens, and it's my job as an editor to reshape that into the form that suits the purpose and the theme in which I present.
Amazing point. I love that. There are still some things that take time, right? In the very instant ephemeral world. It's kind of like, disheartening, but then you're like, oh yeah, I have to give in, right? There are still some things that need to move through various atoms and all that, and then we have to still deal with it. So yes, great point. So how can we keep in touch or keep up with, the film, what you're both doing? I know that you have a quite beautiful site for the film, if you want to give that URL and any other information.
Yeah, our website is justicemovie.com, and our Facebook and Twitter and Instagram handle is justiceflix, Flix.
Okay. And Herb, any other elements you'd like to add to that, since you're also seemingly, as you said, about to dash to another project? Any other ways that we can keep up with all the wonderful Herbness that's happening in the world?
Oh God, flattery will get you everywhere, so, that's one question I'm not prepared for, but through you, being able to, in your article and then through the podcast, being able to follow the project, and through the efforts of the project, then I promise that you'll know more.
That sounds good. All right, you guys. Well, thank you both again so much for taking out time to be able to talk with us. I hope that the premiere is a massive success in San Francisco. And still, like you said, it's just kind of a shame that a lot of the topic is still something which needs to even be addressed today. But I think it's always just so valid to be able to see where, kind of the things come from that we're still dealing with today, and being able to leverage that into the hope and knowing that there always is a new way to be able to do things, and progression, and people coming together to be able to do that. So I want to thank you both so much. You guys do look out for the film. Again, it is American Justice on Trial, and you have the URLs to be able to keep up with everything. I am Lauren deLisa Coleman for the Inside series here at Filmio. We'll be bringing you many more interviews during the San Francisco Film Festival. And thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.